So, Marcus Williams, he's been a highly discussed name, I would say, when it comes to pointing the finger at this defense. He's been somebody that, of course, signed that 5-year, I think I want to say $70 million.
70, yeah, 70 something. Yep.
5 years, $70 million in 2022. As you know, it was an uncharacteristic splash for the Ravens in free agency. They don't typically, they try to pay their homegrown men. I'm sure Kyle Hamilton is going to be one of them coming up here soon. Maybe Brandon Stevens gets an extension. But Marcus Williams, they sort of they diverted from their usual business strategies a few years ago. And availability's been tough for him. He tore his pec, of course, and played pretty much through it last year, which was admirable. But he hasn't had the splash plays, I would say, that a lot of us felt like he would give the Ravens over these last couple of years, even though his first year in Baltimore was a successful one. It's been regressing since then. And he just had some interesting tweets and quotes. I should say quotes that he gave, and then they were put out as tweets by the media earlier today, Fem. And I wanted to read them for you. He was asked by Cordell Woodland of The Fan if his role has changed this year compared to last. And he was quoted for saying, "I don't really know. I just do my job. Whatever they ask of me, I'm going to do it." More on Marcus. He was asked about getting back to forcing turnovers. Quote, the ball just has to come my way. When it does, I'll make the best of the opportunity. But until then, I'll just keep doing the job I have to do. He was also asked if the defense plays differently with a late game lead. And he responded by saying, quote, "We just got to finish the game out strong. When they get in those passing situations, we got to take the ball away and get off the field on third down." And here's one statistic before I get your thoughts on him overall. In terms of deep safety play, okay, he's given up 12.5 yards per target. Marcus Williams is. Eddie Jackson, 13.2 yards per target. It just hasn't been good enough. My question for you is, how much do you think this would change overnight? Should they go in between now and the trade deadline, November 5th, bring in a Zadarius Smith, bring in a pass rusher to bolster that room? Does it change things overnight in your mind?
Does it change things overnight? I don't think anything is going to change things overnight. I just think that this team, the defensive side of the ball, just needs more time kind of simmering with each other and getting used to the new things, the new coaches, the new approaches, the new ways they communicate. It's just going to take time, and guys just doing their job, And I think that it's unfortunate because it does feel like Marcus is a good guy, and obviously he's extremely talented. We know. I remember him at New Orleans and how he played at New Orleans. He's a top 5 safety. And unfortunately, I'm gonna bring up a play that wasn't his fault, but everybody was roasting him on X in social media. The touchdown to it was to Mike.
What night are we talking about here?
Against Tampa.
Mike Evans.
Mike Evans, yeah. Mike Evans got free. What they did was, I think it was a 2x2 set, and it was what I remember is this. Mike ran kind of like a deep route, and there was a receiver underneath Mike. It could have been a running back, and it could have been a tight end. I'm not sure exactly. But Brandon Stevens, instead of carrying
it was Sterling
the receiver.
Shepard.
Okay, Sterling Shepard. Okay.
Instead right? Yeah.
I don't remember that part. The part is that Marcus had to go with, I guess, whoever that first receiver was, and then Mike Evans came behind, and then a back went into the flat. And instead of staying with Mike Evans, who was the next number 2 deep threat, he jumped the back in the flat, which then put Marcus in a bind because Marcus was carrying the deep guy. Marcus can't let anyone get behind him. And then Mike Evans comes down behind. Brandon Stevens should have carried him. And everyone wanted to say that it was Marcus's fault. It wasn't Marcus's fault. It was Brandon's fault. And they're playing zone at that point, I know. But the point is that now he's getting blamed for things that aren't even his fault because the play has been up and down. You know what I mean? And Brandon Stevens has played pretty good.
Yes, for sure. You know what you're making me think of, too, along those lines of him being in the vicinity of these plays. And maybe I was even guilty of doing this in game. Things are happening in game quickly. You see Marcus is around it. 32. It's got to be on him.
Yeah, exactly.
Really, the first touchdown that Terry McLaurin scored the other day, Commanders Ravens, it was he dusted Brandon off the line, and then Marcus was caught getting fooled by Jaden's eyes on the back end. But that doesn't happen if Brandon doesn't get beat off the line. So there's another
Yeah.
example of how sometimes we're quick to just in game make these blanket statements. I'm guilty of it as well. I got to be better at it in terms of in game tweeting. But that made me think that the Mike Evans example that you just brought up, I think, is right in line with that one as well from the Commanders game.
Yeah. And so, I don't know what the elixir is. I do think bringing in as a Darius Smith could be helpful. I mean, we all have these delusions of grandeur about Max Crosby. I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, if anyone's ever been born to be a Raven, it's that dude for sure. But he's probably not, the money, the assets that they'd have to give up. But if you want to put all your chips into the center of the table and say, we're going all in right now, that's the guy you want to go get. But I do think getting a pass rusher would definitely help. And let me commend Marlon right now. Marlon came into this offseason and said, I'm going to lose 10 to 15 pounds. Lamar did the same thing. And they're both Lamar is already a 2-time MVP. I mean, each year Lamar just stacks a better season. Marlon looks like old Marlon. I think being a little lighter, I made that same decision when I was a player. It allowed me to play 11 years. I've started to play lighter. And I think Roquan should pull a page from that and maybe think about Roquan's a beast. We know that his mental makeup, his leadership is never in question. I do feel like I don't know if it's a analysis or if it's just a speed thing, but I do think that Roquan, and maybe he can't, I don't know if he can do it in season. I think some guys could do it in season. There is a caloric deficit and there are some cardio things that need to be done to kind of take that weight off. And there's some nutritional things that need to be done too, which obviously I'm an expert at. That's another story for another day. But my point is that I think guys playing faster and recognizing that speed and decision-making will get you in the right place. And so I'm thinking about all the little things that can be done during the season. And once again, I love Roquan. I'm not trying to throw Roquan under the bus at all, but we all have seen that he's not playing the same level of Mike linebacker that he's been playing over the years. And once again, I don't know if that's a weight thing. I don't know if that's a diagnosis thing, or if it's just him trying to do too much. Whatever it is, it's adding to the issues that we're seeing on the defense overall. I haven't heard Roquan speak to it specifically. He doesn't need to answer to me. I know that inside that locker room, he's probably answering to his teammates and to himself in regard to how he can improve his play. But when it comes to communication, when it comes to all the physical things that you can do, and then a pass rush, right, as well, I'm just thinking of all the little things I can throw in the pot that in aggregate would improve the defense in the short term. And that's one of the things that I see. Sorry to go off on a tangent, Bobby, but that's just one of the things I've been thinking about.
Well, I'm glad you did, because meanwhile, he is the second leading defensive tackle leader across the league. He's 2 behind Zaire Franklin, and those two have 76 and 74 total tackles to lead the way defensively speaking. So the splash plays that maybe you're alluding to from last year, the ridiculous hard hitting, I mean, there's still plenty of them.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I wonder if there's anything to this that, okay, you're talking about the weight and the physique side of things, but what about what's on his plate? Because he goes from
that's a good point.
A running mate, right, that was an all-pro caliber linebacker for them last year in the middle and PQ. And now we all think that Trenton maybe can get there at some point in his career, but this is essentially his rookie year in terms of workload and bulk and what's on his plate. And he's not an every down backer. So, and we know that Rowe wears the green dot communication device as well. So I wonder how much of that is just based on, damn, this guy's got a lot on his workload and the personnel is different than a year ago.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. That's probably another factor that I probably should add in, that I know intuitively, but I probably haven't, explicitly touched on it. I think the problem that I'm having is I just see way too many running. And, I was a third down back. I played fullback, I played tailback, and I did a lot of single back stuff. And I love third down, getting lost in the mix on a drag route, leaking out late, checking and then drifting off into a check down somewhere. Backs got to be accounted for. And there's just too many backs running free in open space. And a lot of times it is a linebacker, right? Or a safety or a nickel or dime defensive back that's sitting in zone that's supposed to be picking that guy up. You don't just drop into a zone with nobody around. You drop into a zone and a man. Like eventually you got to cover somebody. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I just see way too many guys running free late in plays, and that's a byproduct of two things. One, guys getting lost, right? Guys getting locked in on something they shouldn't be locked in on. And two, it's a lack of pressure on the quarterback, making him get the ball out of his hand. Because if you give a guy enough time, he's going to find somebody, right? And I think these things are all byproducts of what we're talking about. It starts at the very top with new coaches, missing like awesome coaches that are gone, new coaches in new roles, new players in new roles, right? And the lack of players that have moved on to other places that had a fine-tuned Lamborghini on defense last year. And it's not there yet. But what I love about the Ravens is that there's no team that takes an insult and turns it into something prosperous. You know what I mean? Like nobody takes a dig better and says, "Oh, really? Watch this," right? Like the Ravens are. I love when they talk badly about the Ravens on any level, whether it's Coach Harbaugh, whether it's Lamar, whether it's the defense, because these guys are petty, and that's what makes them great. You got to be petty as a professional athlete. You got to manufacture shit sometimes. You know what I mean? And the Ravens, as an organization, we always feel like we're not getting the respect that we deserve. So I know these guys are taking it serious. And like I said before, I still bet, and I think that the Tampa game would have put me right in on track to the statement that I made a couple weeks ago. I still think that this defense will be a top 10 scoring defense when it's all said and done.
And for the record, along those lines, just given that we began this conversation talking about with respect to the trade deadline, are you of the belief, because of that comment that you made, that you think it's 80% communication issues versus talent, right? That's what you said. So are you saying that when looking at potential acquisitions, position-wise, that they would be more benefited right now by a pass rusher than they would be on the back end?
If you put me in a box and said, like, if you didn't let me look at any of the players, if you just said you get one choice, you get a pass rusher or somebody on the back end, absolutely a pass rusher. Now, who those guys on the back end are and who that pass rusher is would definitely impact my decision. But if you just said you get one choice, I'm taking a defensive end or a pass rush guy.
Yeah, I am as well. Let's get some injury report updates in here. This just came out within the last 45 minutes or so for Sunday's game. What's most notable is that Marlon Humphrey is doubtful. He did not practice all week long. He had the knee injury, of course, at the end of the first half that he left the game with, did not return. Obviously, his 2 interceptions were paramount and really changed the way in which that game was going. So he's trending obviously towards not playing, which would be a big blow, being that he is the second highest interceptions getter so far, with 4 of them through 7 weeks. Outside of that, Travis Jones is questionable up there on the defensive front with an ankle. He was a DNP on Wednesday, but limited Thursday, Friday. Zay Flowers, you asked me about him prior to coming on the show. He was a DNP the first 2 days of practice, limited today. He's got a questionable game status coming up for Sunday. Makes you feel like he's going to try and give it a go. Keaton Mitchell's, TJ Tampa, both out. Nate Wiggins is questionable. He was a DNP Wednesday, full participant on Thursday, limited today with a shoulder/illness designation. And there's a bunch of guys on this list, but those are sort of the notable ones. Does anything stick out to you there? And if Marlon can't go, which it looks like he can't, you expecting Jameis to be able to put up some points on Sunday?
So I think Jameis is a great option for them. He's going to be the best option that they have. He's probably been the best option they've had this whole time. And I expect him to give them a bump. I've heard a lot of crazy scores, 41-20, 34-10. I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is going to be a tight game, especially in the first half. It's a divisional game. Cleveland is the most physical team that I've seen the Ravens play probably in the Lamar era. In the Lamar era, Cleveland is the most physical team I've seen. And I'm counting Pittsburgh too. Sure. Cleveland put it this way, Cleveland and Pittsburgh are the 2 most physical teams that I see the Ravens play. And Cleveland has a knack for shutting down the run game. When you go heavy and big personnel with 2 tights, Cleveland, that's their specialty. That's what they want. They want big dudes banging with big dudes, and they're good at it. So my hope is the Ravens, with Isaiah and Mark in, whether they go 2 tights or 3 wides with a single tight end, they can still go spread and have guys extended from the line of scrimmage and just create space. I think that's the best way to go about it with Derrick Henry in the backfield. I think if you can run with Derrick Henry out of 3 wides, that means that Pat Ricard is probably on the sideline, or you can go what they call E personnel. E personnel is 2 backs and 3 receivers. You can go with Pat Ricard and 3 receivers, and I think that's the formation, or I'm sorry, that's the personnel group that I want to see the run out of. If you go big on big, I feel like you're creating, like, of course you test it out, you try it out because that's what you do, but I feel like you're creating, you're beating your head against the wall and creating a scenario where you're going with their best personnel group, and the Ravens have multiple personnel groups that are all effective. So I'm always about least easiest path of resistance, or least path of resistance, right? That's the phrase.
Yeah.
Path of least resistance is the phrase. Yeah. It took me 3 tries, but you know what I'm trying to say. So I feel like this game is going to be close. I feel like Cleveland knows the Ravens. I think I think Cleveland's going to get a boost from Jameis. He's a much better leader, just in regard to the way he carries himself, the way he talks to his teammates, the way he encourages them. And Nick Chubb is going to be in the second week of his comeback. And David Njoku is a beast against us. Every time this dude comes out in balls, he's going to be out there with no shirt on, and it could be 30 degrees. And you know what he's going to be doing? No shirt, letting you see his physique, letting you know he's here. Dude's a monster. And he always plays well against the Ravens. And all that stuff for show, I don't give a damn about that. But my point is that they're not afraid of the Ravens, right? Like, they are a physical team that wants to play a physical brand of football. And I expect this game to be close. Do I want to throw out a score? Okay, I'll throw out a score. I'll say 31-20 Ravens. But I think that 31-20 is going to be tight early.